back to EDH Deck Building. I am your host, Demo, and this is 5 unique builds for 5 commanders where I take 5 commanders and try to build them in a different way, or sometimes I just come up with a unique idea and then actually find a commander that happens to fit that idea, more the method 2 thing. In this case, I actually have probably a lot of really popular commanders. There's not a lot of unpopular commanders in this video. I'm just trying to build them in a different way, or I have a unique idea that happens to fit that commander. Let's start out with Kamiz Obscura Oculus, which is certainly a commander that isn't unpopular. It's actually quite a bit more popular than I thought it would be. There is a lot of ways to go with this commander, which is likely why it is so popular. So 1 white, blue, and a black octopus rogue, 2/4. Whenever you attack, target attacking creature can't be blocked this turn. It connives, then choose another attacking creature with lesser power. That creature gains double strike until end of turn. So because you're making a creature unblockable, you are giving another creature double strike, you are conniving, there's lots going on here. I really like that ability. There's a lot of different ways to go with it. I think this is a super interesting commander. This is a case of an idea I came up with where I was like, okay, this is a really kind of neat idea that I have to find a commander that fits. And what I needed for the idea was a commander that makes creatures unblockable. And of course, there's other commanders you can use for this, so you can take this idea and use other commanders with it. I thought this was a great commander for it because, first of all, the colors were right where I wanted it to be. Although having red in here would be nice as well. I thought Esper was good, especially because our commander is giving us that fantastic ability that works with what we're doing. And, you know, the double strike's good too, but the big one there is making our creatures unblockable, because what we are doing is we are using this old phrase that you don't see on cards anymore: when this creature attacks and isn't blocked. And it's the last time we saw a card like this. I mean, it's been a while. It looks like Cybermat from Doctor Who, which is an artifact creature that when it attacks and isn't blocked, it gets +X/+0 until end of turn, where X is the number of attacking artifact creatures. So I guess that would be probably the newest card that we have that phrasing on. It used to be phrasing that they used all the time back in the day. There's actually quite a few older cards that are doing that, because instead of dealing combat damage, it's attack and isn't blocked. And so I wanted to throw a bunch of creatures like that in a deck. Like Bone Dancer, for example, is one that I have recommended on my channel before. When it attacks and isn't blocked, you may put the top creature card, again, something else they used to do back in the day they don't do anymore, from defending player's graveyard onto the battlefield under your control. If you do, it assigns no combat damage, and that's the part that always goes along with whatever that unblocked ability is, right? You're always going to not assign combat damage. So I guess it's maybe a worse version of when this creature deals combat damage, because you're not actually getting in for combat damage. But it's kind of a good thing because you don't care about getting in for combat damage. You're just trying to get the ability. Feral Zealot is one I just talked about on my 10 cards video, which is a great one. And again, if you have a Kamiz deck already, you can just throw some of these creatures in there. Maybe you're already doing that. I don't know. You can even double up on some of these things, like Feral's Mantle, which is basically the Feral Zealot ability. You can put that on your Bone Dancer, right? So you can put it on another creature that's already, you know, you're planning to have attack and unblocked, which of course with your commander is very easy to do. Whenever enchanted creature attacks and it isn't blocked, its controller may have it deal damage equal to its power +2 to another target creature. If it does, deals no combat damage this turn. So again, if I have this on my Bone Dancer, it's going to deal, 4 damage to any creature, and I'm going to get that other ability as well. I mean, this is pretty good, right? Not too shabby. There's a lot of neat effects here. Kukumesa Pirates, funny enough, is one that people used to play in Commander quite a bit. I used to see it, you know, a decent amount back in the day, because whenever it's attacked and isn't blocked, you gain control of target artifact defending player controls. Of course, people would just use it to steal everyone else's soul rings. There's actually a lot here. Again, if you're already doing this, you know, great. If you already have a Kamiz deck and you just want some interesting creatures to throw in there, great. You also could build around it entirely, I think. And in fact, even more so, a creature I talked about in another 10 cards video, maybe it was the same one, I can't remember, but recently, Elusive Tormentor, which of course we will completely ignore because all we want is the back Insidious Mist. And now I found a place for it, right? In that video I was talking about, where's a commander where this fits? I think this is a great place for it. It is an 0/1 hexproof indestructible creature. So your opponents are going to have a heck of a time getting this thing off the battlefield. And it also can't be blocked. That's a lot of great stuff to have on a creature, but of course it's an O1. With your Kamiz, and again, if you have a Kamiz deck, you could just try this guy out in there. The Conniving will put counters on him. As you're putting counters on him, he's going to get bigger. So now the hexproof and indestructible becomes a lot more relevant. And when he's attacked and isn't blocked, again, we have that exact same phrasing, but we're not going to flip him over. You're just going to leave him on the backside once he's flipped over, and you're just going to try to make him bigger. And then, of course, as time goes on and he gets a little bigger, now we can start using our commander to give him double strike, right? So he'll work in the deck as well. You don't need to use this commander for this idea. You can use other commanders. There's a lot of really neat red cards that do this same phrasing of attacking and isn't blocked. If you can find a red commander that works better, this is a commander that I thought worked great. If you have a Kamiz deck already, you can take a bunch of these neat creatures and throw them in there. All right, Tameshi, Reality Architect. And again, I don't know if I'm going to blow anyone away with this idea I came up with here. This is another case of I was researching a deck idea and then I went looking for a commander and I was like, oh yeah, obviously Tameshi is the perfect commander for this idea. Not necessarily the perfect commander, funny enough. There actually is another commander that is maybe better. It depends. Believe it or not, we do have more than one commander for this theme now. So Genku Future Shaper is also a commander that will work here because it has the phrasing we're looking for, which I will get to. This guy would go in the 99. I don't know if the people are putting this in the 99, they're Tameshi decks, but there is a lot of overlap here, of course. Genku might be better. Tameshi might be better. It depends how you want to build the deck, but the idea is the main thing here. So Tameshi is 2 and a blue. Moonfolk Wizard 2/3. Whenever one or more non-creature permanents are returned to hand, draw a card. This ability triggers only once each turn. And the funny thing about this is that to me seems like a really interesting ability and very build-aroundable. And they could have just stopped there. Again, that's just how they do commanders now. It's always the setup and the payoff, or it's the payoff then the setup, or it's ability you can build around, and then let's give you another ability you can build around. I think a lot of people have ignored that first ability. Most of the Tameshi decks, all of the Tameshi decks I have come across, have completely ignored that ability, which I think is fantastic. Just having non-creature permanents be returned to hand on everyone's turn. Now, of course, the second ability is playing into that first ability, which is mostly what people are doing, right? X and a white, return a land you control to owner's hand, return target artifact or enchantment card with mana value X from your graveyard to the battlefield to activate and only use a sorcery. So that is the more desirable ability, let's say. It's the one that everyone seems to go after. Again, maybe people are already doing this, I don't know. Every Tameshi deck I've seen is people are building around that last ability, getting cheap artifacts or cheap enchantments out of their graveyard repeatedly, which of course is good. And then also you get the card draw because you've returned a land to your hand. But then that's it. You just move on. That ability is only as a sorcery, so you're not taking advantage of the first ability. The first ability is if I bounce things either to my hand or my opponent's hand on other opponents' turns, I could be drawing 4 cards per turn cycle. That seems really good. And there's also a lot you can do around that, by the way, drawing cards on other people's turns, drawing your second card each turn. All that is another thing that I really haven't seen anyone building around with Tameshi. It's mostly just I'm doing artifacts and enchantments, which is fine. I'm trying to give you another way to build around here. And again, I got into this idea because I was actually researching an idea. For me, I see all of these cards that have similarities that I'm like, okay, can we bring all this together and actually make a deck with it? And again, it was kind of funny that I didn't even think of Tameshi or Genku for this originally. It started with Stormfront Riders, which is such a unique, old, interesting card. 4 and a white human soldier, 4/3 flying. When Stormfront Riders enters the battlefield, return 2 target creatures you control to their owner's hand. Not great, but it has this very unique ability. Whenever Stormfront Riders or another creature is returned to your hand from the battlefield, create a 1/1 white soldier creature token. That's very unique phrasing. Now, this is the part where people will say, well, why are you using Tameshi for this idea? Because, of course, Tameshi says non-creature. Sure, and maybe that's why Genku is better here, because of course Genku is whenever another non-token permanent you control leaves the battlefield. So you'll actually get more triggers here. With him you get to make other tokens, so maybe it actually is a better fit. However, I kind of like the card draw, so I don't know. Either will work, whatever direction you want to go is fine. Baron Tellurian Archmage, and this is why the deck would be white and blue. Again, I was like, okay, I want to make a white-blue deck here, and I'm bouncing stuff back to my hand. And then I went on searching for commanders that work. And again, it seems pretty obvious in hindsight. So Baron says at the beginning of your end step, if a permanent was put into your hand from the battlefield this turn, draw a card. So very similar wording, slightly different. Again, there's a lot of wording here that isn't all the same. Again, Tameshi has different wording. Genku has different wording. It's all different wording, but all works together with returning permanents or creatures or whatever from the battlefield to your hand. But also bouncing your opponent's stuff will also work that way, right? So that is something to keep in mind. Again, some of this works with us bouncing stuff to hand. Some of this works with, we can use it on our opponents too, right? It's not all completely unified. There is a general theme here though. The big one, though, is Azorius Aether Mage. And again, I don't know if anyone's playing this in their Tameshi deck. They sure as heck should be. They probably should be playing it in their Genko decks as well. Funny old card again that just has that very unique phrasing. 1 white, blue, human wizard, 1/1. Whenever a permanent is returned to your hand, you may pay 1 if you do draw a card. So again, in our Tameshi deck, normally you would use that last ability, return a land to your hand, return your Urza Saga or whatever to play, like a lot of people probably do in that deck, and then pay an extra 1 and get it. Now you're getting 2 card draw, so that seems pretty great. But that was the genesis of this deck, was basically Azorius Aether Mage, Stormfront Riders, and I'm thinking, okay, we're doing sort of bounce, tribal, return stuff to our own hand, all that kind of stuff. Obviously, there's a lot you can build around there. And then I thought, okay, well, Tameshi's a great commander for that, but I don't see a lot of people doing that, right? And a lot of people in particular aren't doing it on opponents' turns. Again, you could be drawing cards on everyone's turn with your Tameshi. I don't see a lot of people doing that. So I know it seems maybe kind of obvious, and I've thrown out a few cards that you could throw in the deck if you want to go forward with this, but we're just building around that first ability. I mean, you can build around the second ability, I guess, a little bit, but just focus on the first ability. I actually think it's better. It's drawing you lots of cards, and I don't see people focus on it that much. Just try to return either to your hand or your opponent's hand, because of course, Tameshi says permanents are returned to hand. Just in general, you get to draw a card. Again, you could also do the same thing with Genku, and in fact, Genku might work better with the Stormfront Riders because that's dealing specifically with creatures. Funny enough, they just came out with a card in Bloomborough, Durport Mage, which is also, again, using different wording, but does work here whenever one or more other creatures you control leave the battlefield without dying. So again, we have another phrasing here. You get to draw a card. It doesn't seem super obvious that all this works together because all these cards seem to have different wording. And putting it all together in a deck, though, again, some things will trigger sometimes and sometimes not. But if you put it all in a deck together, I think it'll work great. Obviously, it's going to be a white-blue deck. Whether you use Tameshi or Genku as the commander is entirely up to you. I think it's a good idea, though. All right, Obeka, Splitter of Seconds, another really popular commander, and maybe not a super unique idea, but I think it's a neat way to go with Obeka. So 1 blue, black, red, Ogre Warlock, 2/5 with Menace. Whenever Obeka Splitter Seconds deals combat damage to a player, you get that many additional upkeeps after this phase. Wow, and of course, that has some huge potential, and everyone knew right away this is going to be a really powerful, really popular commander because, of course, the potential here is huge. And again, guys, I go on EDH Rec a lot of times, right? I'll see this commander, just like with Tameshi, I look at it, and then I go to EDH Rec. Just again, that's one of the things I use EDH Rec for. It's not for ideas for myself. It's to see what everyone else is doing. And I'm looking on there and I'm like, okay, well, no one's really doing the whole bounce thing with Tameshi. And I look on EDH Rec for Obeka and I'm like, okay, well, everyone is doing the enchantments or artifacts, mostly enchantments, funny enough. I mean, most Obeka decks are like almost enchantment tribal decks, but most of them, from what I can tell, is just enchantments that trigger on your upkeep. The courts, which they're all great, right? The courts that give you the monarchy and then trigger on your upkeep. Almost every Obeka deck is using those. Lots of stuff like that. What I think is actually a great way to build this deck. And I mean, you could, again, mix it up, sure. But if you focus on one thing, that gives you more to build around. So what do I mean by that? Well, I'll tell you what I mean by that when I tell you my idea. It's suspend. Making a suspend deck with Obeka, which again, I think people have thrown a couple suspend cards in their Obeka deck, but you could go focused suspend and just do that. And the reason why I think that's better, and yeah, you could throw a Phyrexian Arena in there still and stuff, sure, I guess. But if you just go focus suspend, and I'll tell you why this is better, okay? Because I literally just played against this commander a little while ago and at times talked about monolith commanders and what happens if your commander's not on the battlefield. I just made a video about that. And this person, they struggled because not only does your commander have to be on the battlefield, but you have to attack with it. And funny enough, that person attacked me and I just blocked. and they didn't get the trigger because it's a deal combat damage trigger. And they were actually kind of shocked at that I actually blocked. I sacrificed a creature to not let them get the trigger. I'm like, of course. Why would I let you get in and get all that? I can see what you have on the battlefield, right? The suspend strategy to me is a good strategy for Obeka. And I mean, again, not I throw in one or two suspend cards, entirely a suspend deck. Because if your commander's not on the battlefield, I think it's pretty good still, right? Now, why does suspend work? Obviously, because it's an upkeep trigger, right? If you have a suspend card in exile, it removes the time counters on upkeep. And of course, if you have 4 upkeeps, it'll come off suspend really, really quickly, right? You'll get it like right away, the very next turn or something like that. You could easily find enough cards in Grixis colors to do that. If you focus on the suspend, then you can do all the suspend stuff. Now, what does that mean? Well, you can do the time counters thing. You can do an instant sorcery theme, which of course works really great in Grixis, right? That's another thing you can do here. But what you could also do is the cast from exile stuff again. And all of that is actually a pretty good deck. That all meshes really, really well together. And your commander would be just used to speed up the process with the suspend, right? You wouldn't be relying on your commander so much, right? So I like the suspend build. Again, more of an instant sorcery build with Obeka. Maybe that's a little less obvious, and I cast stuff from exile, all that kind of stuff. And I think it works better because it makes it so that you rely less on your commander and makes it less of a monolith build, in my opinion. All right, Trostani, Selesnya's Voice. Again, pretty popular commander, one that's been popular in the commander format since forever. Used to be, man, it was definitely one of the most popular white-green commanders in the format. 1 or 2, definitely right at the top. Has fallen off, but still really popular. It was just such an easy build around, right? Because it's doing lots of good stuff. And most decks I used to see back in the day with Trostani were just life gain decks. I am going in a completely different direction here. But again, this is a broader theme. And in fact, it's a theme I've been researching an absolute ton. I will be talking about it in a couple of videos coming up. And I might have touched on it already. I've built my own deck with this theme. I'm kind of a little obsessed with it. I will be talking about it in my 60,000 subscribers video whenever that comes out. I don't know when that's coming out because I don't know when I'm going to hit 60,000 subs, but whenever that comes out, whether it was before I make this video or after, you will see exactly. I'll go even more in depth to it there, okay? However, I'm going to touch on it with Trostani, and I'm going to touch on it even more so with the next commander. So Trostani is green, green, white, white, Dryad, 2/5. Whenever another creature you control enters, you gain life equal to that creature's toughness. So again, very easy to gain life. It was tough back in the day playing against Trostani decks. You almost had to get in for commander damage. You know, again, for the people that don't like commander damage, beating a Trostani deck was so tough because they just gained so much life. So obviously you could do the life gain stuff. You always could do the life gain stuff with Trostani because it's just so easy to gain life in that deck. However, again, kind of like with Tameshi, I found that people did not use this other ability nearly as much in their Trostani decks. 1 green and a white, tap and populate. This is just like with some of the other commanders I've talked about. Not so much a method to, but you could take this idea with the other commander I'm talking about. It'll all sort of meld together once I get it all out with the last commander, but you could take this idea with another commander that's doing populate. We actually have a few commanders now in the format that are doing populate. However, I like it really good here. This is actually a great idea with Trostani, I think, which is the, not a big secret again, Dark Depths idea. The Dark Depths combo is, you know, pretty good in the commander format. It's certainly not going to end games very quickly. Honestly, I think it's actually a little overrated in the commander format. However, I really, really like it here because of the populate, right? This populate ability, I think, doesn't seem that great for most people. They look at it and they go, okay, well, I got a 1/1 or a 2/2 token in play. And a lot of people do this. Again, I would play it against Trostani decks and they'd have like a 2/2 token in play or something. And they go, okay, well, I got extra mana kicking around, so I guess I'll just pay 3 and tap and populate and make another 2/2 token. Doesn't seem that great. Populate gets a lot better when you are populating a giant creature. Okay, now, obviously, there's a lot to talk about here. We first have to look at Dark Depths if you're not familiar. It is a land, And part of the reason why I like this in a Trostani deck is just because Trostani's white-green. And of course, getting lands, and in fact, even in white, you could put Search for Glory because, of course, Dark Depths is a snow land, if you didn't know that. And Search for Glory is a white tutor because white actually tutors pretty well. I'll be talking about that in a video coming up as well. You can go get your Dark Depths with Search for Glory, but of course, you don't need to because green has 1,000 options to go get lands. That's why I like white-green. If you're doing a Dark Depths deck, white-green, I think, are probably the best color combination for it. On top of that, you are sacrificing this, and green also has, and white also has, again, green has the play lands from my graveyard thing. So if someone managed to get rid of your Merit Lage, you can get it back. But of course, white has tons of those too. White has lots of I just get, Savine's Reclamation. It has lots of those effects. Another thing white does really, really well. So white-green is by far the best colors if you want to do a Dark Depths deck. So that's why I'm saying if you have a Trostani deck already and you're kind of bored with just a generic life gain deck, I know for me, I have a life gain deck that I kind of got bored with because it was just a generic life gain deck. So I tried to do something different. This is something different that you can do with your Trostani deck if you just really like that commander. You wouldn't have to change too much. You would just have to put this in and obviously the combo piece. There's a couple ways to combo with this. I guess I should get into a little bit in case you guys aren't familiar. It's a legendary snow land, enters the battlefield with 10 ice counters on it, and you can pay 3 to remove an ice counter from it. And when it has no ice counters on it, you sacrifice it. If you do, you create Merit Lage, a legendary 2020 black avatar creature, token flying, and indestructible. Pretty good. Again, it's not going to end the game immediately, but it's certainly going to be threatening. People just say, okay, well, you can just path it or something. There's lots of ways to get rid of it, like a Baleful Master. Even black has no problem getting rid of a Merit Lage token now. Sure, but in white and green, we can very easily get this back out of the graveyard and keep doing it over and over and over again. And of course, with our commander, that's where the populate comes in. And in fact, there's a few things we're going to do here, okay? What we're going to do with the populate here, and again, why I chose this commander. First of all, obviously, when we create the token, we're going to gain 20 life. That's pretty good. That's a giant token. Another upside to having Trostani as the commander here. As soon as that token enters the battlefield, we gain 20 life. That's fantastic. And yes, it is legendary, so you can't just sit there populating and making more tokens. Or can you? You actually can. Of course, they'll legend rule themselves, but they are still entering the battlefield. So what your commander's ability becomes is pay 3 mana, gain 20 life, right? You get to keep the original token or the new one, whichever you choose, but every time you use that populate ability, you will gain 20 life. That's huge, right? What else it does, someone's about to swords your Merit Lage token. In response, I populate it and keep the one that isn't being swords, and I sacrifice the one that isn't. So the populate actually works fantastic with the Merit Lage token. I guess I should probably point out how you get the Merit Lage token. You don't actually have to pay the 3. If you're not familiar, you guys can maybe do some more research. I don't want to get too much into it here. You can do some more research on how to get that Merit Lage token a lot faster. There is a few ways to do it. The easiest way is Thespian Stage, which again is a land. So very easy to put this combo together. Hour of Promise, right? I get Dark Depths and Thespian Stage. Bam, they're one card that gets them both into play. There's other things you could do in the deck, and I would absolutely and certainly put a Greater Good in the deck or anything that is, you're already doing the toughness matters, power matters sort of scenario. So I would absolutely do Greater Good, Momentous Fall, all of that, because you have this giant token creature. Another reason why I like white and green here, with white, we have the Blacksmith skills, all of that. Phase out my token. You can Clever Concealment, phase it out, and it will come back in on your untap. It's just so easy to protect that token. You don't even need to because your commander can populate, but it's so easy to in white-green colors, right? White and green is by far the best color combination for protecting your stuff. So once you get it on the battlefield, good luck your opponent getting rid of it. But if they do, you got the backup, and getting stuff back out of the graveyard, super easy in white-green, so you don't really have to worry about your combo getting disrupted. Even if somebody exiles, let's say your Dark Depths is in your graveyard, gets exiled, I can, because white-green's great at this too, I can Rift Sweeper, shuffle it back into my library, or I can pull from eternity, put it back in my graveyard, and then just play it from my graveyard. So there really is, your opponents will have no avenue to go here. The other thing you could throw in here, okay, which I will be getting to more with the next commander, and again, this is getting into the whole thing I'm talking about in general, which is a legendary tokens theme, because of course, Dark Depths makes a legendary token. You could put a Mirror Gallery in here or a Mirror Box, because of course, that makes it so the legend rule doesn't apply. So that means now we can actually start, and again, you can put other populate effects in here as well. Of course, there's tons. Another thing white-green does best, and in fact, almost entirely white-green is the only color that does it. So once we have a mirror box in play, now we can just start cranking out 20/20 tokens like crazy, right? So that's another thing that you can throw in this deck. Again, if you're just like, okay, well, that's not enough to build around necessarily. And just think of the amount of space you have in your deck. You need a few tutors to get your Dark Depths, a Savine's Reclamation, a Crucible of Worlds, some protection stuff, and the rest of the deck can just be good stuff if you want to. You can also throw a mirror box in. You can throw more populate stuff in. This deck really builds itself. If you want to do a Dark Depths combo, I think Trostani is a great commander. And in fact, white and green is the best color combinations to do that. And if you want to just do a more interesting, unique Trostani deck, here's a great idea for you. However, moving along with the legendary tokens idea, I am doing the same for Jedit Ojanen. Just kidding, not that Jedit Ojanen. That's like the worst card ever printed. Not that Jedit Ojanen either. No, we're going with the newest version of Jedit Ojanen that came out in Dominaria United, right? Or I guess Dominaria United Commander, Jedit Ojanen Mercenary. 1 white and a blue cat mercenary 3/3. When Jedit Ojanen Mercenary, another legendary creature you control enters, you may pay a green. If you do, create a 2/2 green cat warrior creature token with Forest Walk. So what we're doing here is the mirror box, mirror gallery thing that I just talked about, okay? And again, I'm not sure how people are building this deck. I would imagine they're certainly not building it this way because this is a more difficult, janky theme, obviously. And again, I will get more into it in my, 60,000 subs video. I will go more in depth and talk about all the different versions you can make. This is one of many. Mirror box, mirror gallery. There's lots of other options. Depends on the color combinations you're in. We're in blue here, so we can use Sakashima. And of course, Sakashima is extra good because Sakashima can come in and copy your Jedit Ojanen, which means you get double the triggers. The important thing here, though, and why this works, first of all, we're already in the token theme, right? Your commander is creating tokens. So you can already put anything that goes with tokens. And of course, there's a bazillion of those now. I would certainly put in the legendary ones because you're already in legendary tribal here. Put in the Benny Bracks. Put in the Alan Harbreys, right? Any commander in Bant colors that's dealing with tokens in one way or another, you could put in here, obviously, because it's going to get you a trigger off your commander, and your commander's making tokens, right? So that all works. But we're doing the legendary token theme, and why it works for a couple of reasons. First of all, again, I started out in a different direction with this, going down the rabbit hole of legendary tokens, and in fact, I did it in a 5 builds video, I guess a few months ago. Not my last one, but the one before that, I think. Originally, it was Inquisitor Eisenhorn, okay? That was the guy because I thought, okay, that guy is making a 4/4 flying demon. That's pretty good. What if we can put the mirror box, mirror gallery, Sakashima thing in there and just crank out those tokens? That seems like a pretty neat idea. And I really went down a rabbit hole, this whole legendary token things. And of course, most legendary tokens are coming from legendary creatures. There's a bunch of them, particularly creatures that enter the battlefield and then make a legendary token. Tolsimir probably being the best example of that. And of course, all of that works great with Jedit Ojanen. So if I have my Tolsimir come down, he's a legendary creature entering the battlefield, get a trigger off my commander, pay 1 green, make a cat warrior token with Forest Walk. By the way, you're putting Yavimaya in this deck 100% because all your cat tokens are going to be unblockable. Tolsimir also makes that Voja token, right? The wolf token. That is a legendary creature entering the battlefield, right? Those legendary creature tokens you're making are doing that. So I will get to pay another green. By the way, Tangleroot is a funny old card that goes in your Jedit Ojanen deck because it gives you green mana when you cast creature spells that you can use for your commander's ability. Just throwing that out there. But of course, we're going to go one step further, right? We're doing the mirror box, mirror gallery thing. And because a lot of these creatures, these legendary creatures have ETBs that create the tokens, we can do a bit of a blinking theme here, which of course is great in Bant colors. Our commander as well has an ETB essentially, right? When it enters the battlefield, you can make a cat token. So we're going to put some blinking effects in here. Of course, the sky's the limit there. Put in whatever your Brago. There's a great one. It's a legendary creature. Again, you can just put your Rune, you could just start putting all the legendary creatures that blink stuff in here as well. And Brago and Rune can just start blinking all of your other creatures that enter the battlefield and make tokens. This is absolutely a deck that will go off, I promise you, and your opponents will have to board wipe to slow you down. Of course, Bant Colors very much and very easily can protect its board, so you don't have to worry about that. I mean, you could even throw in legendary creatures that protect your board, which of course there are those as well. But essentially the theme here is legendary token tribal. So I'm putting in legendary creatures that make legendary tokens because that will get double triggers off of my Jedit Ojanen. And then you're doing Mirror Box, Mirror Gallery, Sakashima, whatever else you could find in Bant Colors. I think that might be it. You won't need to rely on it entirely. It's not like you're going to need the Mirror Box in play in order for your deck to work. However, I will point out, and again, I'm getting way ahead of myself here because I've already done an absolute ton of research and even put a deck together for myself in this theme, which I will eventually get to when I get to my, personal decks video coming up maybe next month. One thing you do have to prepare for is, of course, I have made a whole bunch of Voja tokens or something like that, and then someone kills my Mirror Box, and now the Legend Rule does apply, and of course, state-based effects will make me Legend Rule all but one of those Voja tokens. You still get dice triggers, okay? So that is important to note as well. It is a good idea to put whenever a creature you control dies, non-token doesn't apply. Obviously, it's got to be token creatures dying. You could just put a Fecundity. I don't know. I'm trying to think. Bant maybe isn't the best colors for that. It'll draw you cards. It'll also draw your opponent's cards, but it'll still work, right? So that's a little bit of a backup. I mean, it's always good. If you're playing a creature-heavy theme, which of course you are, it's always good to have, what if your creatures die? Drawing cards is certainly not going to be an issue here. There's a bazillion ways. Again, you got white and green, which are the best colors to draw cards in a creature theme, in my opinion. Not a very popular commander, and I think this is a great way to go with it. There you go, 5 more unique ideas for 5 commanders, mostly more popular commanders in this video, and maybe not like the most unique ideas ever. Some of these are, there might already be people doing suspend with Obeka. There's probably people putting a couple of suspend cards in their deck with Obeka. I would say just do a dedicated suspend deck there. Maybe there are people doing Tameshi decks where they're bouncing stuff on everyone's turns. Again, I don't know if I'm the first one to come up with these ideas. In a lot of cases, I'm probably not. I'm throwing it out there for you guys. Just run with the idea yourself. See if you like it. Test a few decks. Change commanders. Change a few cards. Whatever you want to do. That is it for today, though, and thanks for tuning in.